we'd like to welcome you all to episode with Manning the Gate Publishing. I'm Jeff Manning. This is my wife, Bonnie Manning. And today we're blessed with having Hollisa Alewine with us. And we're excited about that. A wonderful teacher and author. And we're going to talk today about her novel, Scorpion's Ascent. So it's pretty awesome. I want to take this opportunity to read a little bit about our guest. Hollisa Alewine holds a master's degrees in secondary education and religious education and a PhD in philosophy. She has spent much time in the Arava on archaeological digs, hiking, researching its geographical, and leading tours. She is a retired law enforcement officer from the U.S. Department of Justice. Appreciate your service, Hollisa. Dr. Alewine taught high school English for 7 years before entering law enforcement, and she is retired from the U.S. Department of Justice. Since retirement in 2015, she runs the Creation Gospel Ministry, speaking, writing, and video programming on God's Learning Channel and Hebraic Roots Network. All Bible study workbook royalties and speaking honoraria fund orphanages in Kenya, Rwanda, and India. And that's just an awesome ministry right there. And we appreciate it. Welcome, Hollisa.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you too.
Yes, it's a blessing for sure.
Yep, can't wait to see you in person. It's been a minute. And
It's been more than a minute.
I know. And I was thinking about the first time I met you was at a Becky book retreat, and maybe the first one, because it was 2015, something like that.
Yes. It might have been the only Becky book retreat that we've had. It was really specifically assigned to that. I was thinking I was trying to think of the last time we were together in person, and you actually sent me a framed photograph of us all together.
Saco.
Yeah, it was Sakota a few years ago.
Yes, we were traveling to my dad's in Kentucky, and we surprised you all. We just showed up. We were like the wedding crashers. We were like, hi, we're here. And started that, right? You created the Becky books. Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about that before we jump into the Scorpions?
Sure. Becky stands for Books Encouraging the Kingdom of Yeshua. And they're designed to be easier to read than maybe an in-depth biblical commentary or something. A lot of times it's for newcomers, can I give this to a church friend to help them understand even what Shabbat is? Can I help them if I invite them maybe to a Shabbat service? Can I help them understand what they're seeing and what they're experiencing? Can I clarify maybe what is the Torah? We use the word Torah a lot, and we forget that other people don't really equate that because they're used to saying the word or the scriptures, and knowing even a good definition of the Torah is like, okay, we're talking about the same thing, basically. And so defining terms helps people not to be too suspicious of what they don't understand. If I don't understand something, I'm much more suspicious of it. But once I get it, then it's like, oh, okay, now we can have this conversation. I understand your vocabulary. The feasts, one of my favorites is Truth, Tradition, or Tear.
I have that one. Love it.
It really sorts out a lot of things because we tend to oversimplify when we don't understand. And so on the one hand, we feel like, well, in the New Testament, they're telling us to trash all tradition. But then I'll come along and I'll read a couple of times where Paul is telling Gentiles, I want you to keep the traditions, just that I pass them on to you. And it's like, is he bipolar or is there something I'm not understanding? And if the Bible seems bipolar, it's because we don't understand. The Bible is not confused. We're confused. And so just giving simple explanations of where does tradition fit in? What did Yeshua teach us about tradition? Let's go back to what he said. And then we can understand what Paul meant. And so Becky Books, I brought in some other authors, lady authors, and I think it's done a really fit, into a needed place to help, our church friends understand what we're doing, or even those who are trying to walk more in the feasts and the Sabbaths to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it better. Sometimes we just walk in faith without getting all the information first. And I love faith, but I also like to understand what I'm doing so I can explain it to somebody else. And so I'm lagging behind right now. I think I've got 3 in the oven as far as Becky books. But part of the reason I'm lagging behind on that is because I took the time out here to work on the fiction, and we're in the middle, or hopefully at the end of a move from Kentucky to Mississippi, which, when you change everything to a different state, it takes a lot of time. You guys know that.
We know that. And we're so excited. I am so excited about this book. I had the privilege of reading this book before most people, and while it was still in the oven. And I read it in one day. I could not stop reading it. I kept saying, Chief, you have to read this book. It is so good. And I felt like, there's so many young adult novels that are geared towards a female as the protagonist. But here we have this young man, and I felt like all of your characters, even the animals, were alive in my bedroom. And it was so vivid. And it's really a book where the Bible comes to life through your main character, Zaki. Is that how you say his name?
Saki. I didn't pick an easy name, but I needed to use that name because of the play on words there with the brightness that Saki means in Hebrew. It's like something that's hugely illuminated. And
Well, he is. He is, and it's
Well, I love the cover too. His eyes are captivating, I think. So
is he a
it's really
cutie pie? I mean, this kid is a cutie pie.
nice.
I'd adopt him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's only what, like 3,000 years old, and he's still a cutie pie.
That's right. That's, so what inspired you to write this book?
I think at some point, like you mentioned, we do take tours to Israel, but I've gone much more frequently than that, um, to learn Hebrew, just to do things there, sometimes to volunteer and so forth at the archaeological park where Saki lives or lived 3,000 years ago. And I love it down there in the Arava Desert. It's so quiet, and it'll speak to you if you listen. It's actually one of the stations where the Israelites stopped in their encampments in the wilderness. And if you look that up in the Bible, it'll say Oboth, Oboth, which today it's called Ir Avot. It's it's still there, but it's also where this fortress is built. So if you looked at it, say on an Israeli map, you would probably see both. You would see Avot or Iravot, or you would see Chatzeva, or you would see Ein Tamar, and you say, well, which one is it? And the answer is, of course, yes.
Yes.
Things build up over time. And so they might have multiple names, like we all know Chicago is the Windy City, right? And we know New York is the Big Apple. And so for different reasons, we might call places by different names. But just working there, with the archaeologists and the archaeological technicians, and the lessons you'll learn just sitting in the sukkah at night after the work is over, hearing them talk about techniques and things that they found there previously, and the history of the location, not just what's in the Bible, but what we know from secular history about the location. And I'm like, this is really a special place. And I'm kind of a introvert. And that's why probably the animals are so vivid, because on a lot of days I prefer animals to people. Uh, we get along really well if I've got a cup of coffee.
I plead the fifth. No.
Yeah.
I think that's most writers, but
Yeah. But I would sit in the fortress at night because it's restored. It doesn't have a roof or anything like that, but the dig is kept in really good shape by volunteers. And of course, tourists come and look at it. Um, and so I would sit there at night, and you can see the moon coming up over the mountains of Jordan, off to the east. You probably just saw the sunset to the west over the desert. And you look to the south, that's of course where the Red Sea, Eilat, is. You look up to the north, that's the Dead Sea, Jerusalem, and so forth. And I would sit on those walls at night in the fortress and just say, okay, what did these people watch on television on Wednesday night? They don't have television on Wednesday night, but they tell stories. That's how they would entertain one another. We use television. They told stories. They talked to each other. To this day, Israelis do way more talking to each other than sitting at home watching television. That's why it's an act of real persistence to get the bill at a restaurant, because they just assume you're going to sit there and talk for hours. And you have to be really insist, like, I'm really ready for the bill now. But yeah, and so just putting together what I knew about the animals of the Arava, the plants of the Arava, the history of the Arava, the biblical history of the Arava, what's been dug up archaeologically, what's in the Midrash. There's a lot of interesting stuff in the Midrash about this era between, David and Solomon, right at 1000 BC. And so it's rich with material. Somebody just needs to tell the story. And so I just tried to listen, like, okay, what kind of conversations would they have 3,000 years ago? And pretty quickly, because I was fascinated with the Arabian wolves that passed through that area.
Wow.
And I'm like, these are probably the descendants of the same wolves that traveled through here 3,000 years ago. And we would hike down
Wow.
to Scene, which is Miriam Spring, is what it's called. It's in the Scene Wilderness where she's buried. And because it's a spring that flows year round, you can see all sorts of footprints. Predators, prey, birds, you name it. They all come down there at night for the water, for the fresh water. And you can read the stories. You can even track, and you say, okay, here's some gazelle tracks. And then, oops, there's something following the gazelle that's probably we're not going to have gazelle tracks much longer.
Well, the wolves, I mean, I love the donkey, but the wolves, I thought it was so brilliant because we think of wolves as predators, but then Benjamin was a wolf, right? He's described as a wolf. But when we read about the prophets, uh, they can be wolves in the Bible. But then you turn the wolves into something, it's like they are rescuing our main character and they are following, but not to harm, to protect. And no spoiler alerts, but I was infatuated with them. And the lyrical, almost poetic endings to chapters, I don't know if that came about from reading the Midrash, or but it was a different writing style from what you've previously done. And I just couldn't get enough of it. Matter of fact, I'm going to read it again. And is there a sequel?
There is a sequel. I started writing it. I was down at Tamar for the month of February, pretty much with the sole purpose of writing. I did some painting and simple repairs on our caravan down there, but for the most part, I just sat in the desert and listened and watched. And, I always like to find out more about the birds or whatever. I collected some porcupine quills, like you read about in Scorpion's Ascent. And in fact, those porcupine quills are what gave me the idea of putting that in his toolkit, which I won't give that one away. But yeah, you'll find little things like that and like, okay, that's in the story. I don't know how yet, but it's going to be in the story at some point. So in the sequel, the opening chapter, he's going to have to call in the wolves because it skips forward a year, and there's some trouble in the northern kingdom. We know that the northern tribes were a little not happy with Solomon because of the forced labor of building the palace and the temple. And they were used to having the Ark of the Covenant up in their territory. And it was much more convenient for them there. And it took it took him 7 years to unify the monarchy. And it was a remnant there of Benjamin, our wolf pack here, who were unhappy with the house of David. If you remember the Shimi character who followed David when he was running from Absalom and throwing rocks and cursing him, he was a Benjamite. He felt like Saul, a descendant of Saul, should be king, not Judah, not David. And so I bring that tension forward because we know after Solomon, it breaks out again and literally divides the kingdom. So it's almost it's a sneaky way of teaching younger folks biblical history and helping them think of some of the reasons why, because the Bible tells you this happened. It doesn't always explain to you on the people level why they would be feeling this way. Why would they be resentful? Why would they not want to be part of Judah and the monarchy? What was going on there? And, even the tension between the Edomites, their kinship with the Kenites. Where does all that play in? You read it because maybe somebody made you read it when you were a kid, but did you appreciate it, like it, and understand it?
Yeah, and I think that this is not, it is a young adult novel, but adults need to read the book because they're going to learn history as well. And you're putting flesh on, you're making these characters come to life. And as you said, we get to see what the struggles were and what just a day in their life was like. And so I think it opens, I hope to see this on the big screen. I hope to be watching the series because it just was so good. And I think that so many of your followers, especially, creation gospel, these different genres that you and I have been blessed to be able to write in, because let's face it, not everyone gets to write in several different genres. And your voice through this just really shines. And I think that if you can give this to friends and family who may not understand anything about the creation gospel or your other works, like the Becky books that are pocket books, you can take on a plane, you can take them somewhere and just read them in an hour and absorb that wisdom. This book, I think, is going to open the door to people also learning more about the Torah and the other things you write about. And so we've always felt that way with my fiction. It has opened the door for somebody might read a Christian fiction book. Then they're like, oh, she writes devotionals and oh, she writes this. And so I think I'm really hoping this explodes. But
Well, we'll definitely want to cover this at the end also, but can you let people know how they can get their copy of the book?
Sure. It's scheduled for release in brick and mortar stores July the 1st. They can pre-order on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I'm checking right now because the book has already been printed at this point. It just came in last week, my author copies. So I'm checking with the publisher to see if it's possible for my vendor for my website to go ahead and start fulfilling orders. And if so, I'm going to put that at scorpionsascent.com.
Okay.
And we'll have a vendor that can actually get these out before July the 1st if the publisher says that's okay. I don't want to break the contract. I want to be really careful about that. But if not, they can always pre-order on Amazon. And it was like the number one new release for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, um, just in the pre-order status. And I
that's
can't remember,
awesome.
it was like adult, let's see, young adult Christian historical. I can't remember the genre they put it in, but it did really well. So that tells me that there is an interest because right now, House of David just kind of hit the screen, and I've watched some episodes of like they've done a really good job here. And then I have not watched The Chosen, but from all accounts, it's fascinating. Um, and so if there's a market, if people are interested again in biblical things and like, people we know and love who won't read what we write, but they'll watch something on TV.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
It's
definitely.
great. And there we do have somebody writing a score for the trailer. Um, and it's so exciting because the idea for that, um, some years ago, I had taken some people down to Miriam Spring, and one of them had a shofar with him. And so we're out here in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere. But out in the middle of nowhere, there's this beautiful flowing stream with little waterfalls. And so I started videoing this little waterfall. And so you can hear this beautiful water music. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's this shofar call that sounds exactly like a pack of wolves. This is kind of where that wolf thing came in. And I looked around because I was convinced wolves were going to come out of the wadi, It was,
wow.
I didn't know he was blowing a shofar. And then he blew it again. And so I captured that on my video. And then I figured out, oh, okay, that's him blowing a shofar. But it sounded exactly like wolves, especially in the wadi where everything echoes. And so I took that video and I gave it to a professional jazz musician named Gabriel Bello. And I had met him through some mutual friends at a conference, and we just hit it off. He calls me Tia. And so we were talking, and I played that little clip for him one time. And he's like, you could write a musical score if you just take I forget what you call it in music, but the same like tone or whatever of the shofar. He's like, you could write a rocking, composition, score to that. And I'm like, yeah, because working on the book anyway. And I thought, if you could take that, because in the book, the boy goes out to try to call the wolves in with his shofar. And so he's working on that now, and he'll send me a link to his live stream on YouTube while he's working on it. And I get to watch him like lay the tracks and everything down.
Exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's
awesome.
it's amazing. And it's very epic. It's very movie, it makes you feel like you're sitting in the movies somewhere. And he said he probably has about 45 seconds more to add to it that I guess is in his head, but not yet in the actual music. And, he's experimenting with different instruments in those tracks, but it's like when you watch somebody write, it's not entertaining. But when you watch someone write music, it's entertaining because you can hear the experimentation with the notes and the instruments. Whereas if I'm sitting there writing, that's the most boring thing ever to watch. You don't know what happened in somebody's head. How many times did I change that sentence?
Yeah. Or delete a whole chapter.
Exactly.
Yes. Well,
I got a question for you. Put you on the spot here, okay?
Okay.
As you know, with Manning the Gate Publishing, we're going to have authors watching this, and we know how busy you are. And I'm just wondering, how do you balance writing with the other aspects of your life?
It's super difficult because even though I'm retired, I still have to make a living.
darn it.
I cannot support myself in the manner to which I am accustomed. So yeah, I still have to contract a little bit on the side. And then the ministry is just like having a full-time job because
Mhm.
people sometimes think it's a big ministry and there is no staff. I'm it. This is it.
Hi.
Yeah.
Everything. Answer the emails, deal with, the lady who helps me with all the internet stuff, website building, and then accounting, bookkeeping that we do because of the orphanages, and we're a nonprofit, and everything that goes with having a nonprofit, and the banking, as you guys know right now, when you try to take a donation, it's almost punishment because
Well, and
there's
also websites. You've got your websites, you've got your newsletters, you've got your YouTube channel where you're going live. You have a lot going on. And so, uh, as you were describing being in the desert and being inspired,
yeah.
the inspiration and the creativity that came to you there was stirring up and birthing this book. And it's a wonderful story. And I want to switch gears here because, as most of our viewers know, we did not publish anything for Hollisa Alewine, although we would love to. We'd be honored to. But she is traditionally published now with her works, and we're very proud of her and proud to know her. But we wanted to discuss, because Hollisa and I have helped one another over the years, and we have shared writings, samples, and we've critiqued each other. And sometimes it hurt, but I needed it. And we've tried to celebrate each other's work. And sometimes in the past, Hollisa has even shared some of my books on her newsletter. And we have passed out Becky books and directed people to the creation gospel. And so one of the things that I find is it's hard to get the reviews we need and the support we need. And people may contact us and say, I love this book, I couldn't put it down. But can you tell your readers a little bit about how these reviews help us and what they need to do?
Sure. Reviews are really important because if you don't have the full force of legacy traditional publishing behind you, who have huge marketing budgets so that they can saturate, the interested readers in a particular genre, you really are pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. It's like an extra job. It's not only, okay, do I have to do this, this, and this? And now I have to sell it myself. I have to do my own marketing. And that's expensive to do. Very
Yes.
few people will just promote your work for nothing. And if you try to promote on Facebook, it'll cost you. If you try to promote on Twitter, it'll cost you. If you try to promote on, say, what are they called? Literary blogs, blog tours. It's where you get multiple people to review your work. It's going to cost you like real money.
Yes.
Not just I'll read your work and you read mine. It's going to cost you real money. And so most authors are actually way below the poverty line. If you ever do the research on like what does an author make, like what, $12,000 a year average? So unless you're John Grisham, you're going to have a real struggle finding and establishing an audience. And so the people who read your work and like it, if they can leave any kind of, Amazon is the most difficult place to get a review, I have found. And it seems like Goodreads, for some reason, I get way more reviews on Goodreads than I do on Amazon. And I think it's kind of funny because we get offended at certain platforms. People say, well, I don't like Amazon. Well, guess what? They're partners with Goodreads. And so you might literally get 5 times more reviews, say, on Goodreads than on Amazon, but Goodreads is not going to help you sell that book like Amazon, because Amazon doesn't care about you as a person, they care about money. And if they see that you're getting good reviews and that your book is selling well, then they will actually use it as a suggestion. And you've all seen it if you've been on Amazon, like, okay, also suggested for you is this.
Yep.
People who bought this also bought this. And you're basically getting help with your marketing without paying the extra dollars for somebody to lay eyes on it who might be interested in that. So the people who know and love you, hopefully, you kind of have to lean on them a little bit to say, could you write me a review? I know you hate Amazon, but if nothing else, just write a sentence. I mean,
Yes.
there were like 5 words in a sentence. A star in a sentence is better than nothing with Amazon, because you're like giving me promotion dollars when you do that. I cannot do for myself. I can't write my own reviews. Even I might think it's wonderful, but unless
Yeah.
they do.
Yeah. And I think so many times people do not realize that there are books that I have published that were not 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but almost 10 years of research before I felt that release. Okay, specifically Satan Unmasked, and one woman shared that cover on Facebook and tagged me in it, and I sold so many more books because of that one thing. So if you take a photo of your favorite author's book and post that, tag them, it really does help us. And I think also people don't understand the cost of just publishing a book. So we're already in debt by the time our publishing company was set up to publish my work and protect my writings, but also to publish others that come along that the Father sends. And usually that money helps us publish my works and also support orphans as you do and what have you. But the reviews are so needed. You're going to say something?
Yes. Just believe me, these authors need your support. And it's a rough niche. It really is. the whole thing is over inundated. There's so many authors out there, so many books that are being pushed out there. So whenever you find somebody that you enjoy their writing, you can bless them just as simple as leaving a review on Amazon or on Ingram Spark or whatever platform it is, whether it's Kindle, whether it's audio, no matter what the version of the book, just take the time, give it 5 stars, say some kind words, and it blesses the author. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and so many of these platforms that we were talking about, if I want to market a book on, let's say, BookBub, I already need 50 reviews. Or that, we filled out to run an ad on one of my books with them, and it was going to be over $1,000. So, of course, we did not. But there are rules to all of this. And so those algorithms are real, and they know if that book is doing well. And so when we bought a property in LaGrange, Kentucky, the neighbors were so kind there. They came to the door. They brought cakes. We felt like we were living in the 50s. They left their keys in their car. And these women had a book club, I think, with the Baptist church. And there was 25, 30 or more. And they wanted me to come. They're at one of the book club gatherings. And we had read something. I can't remember the title. But I listened to them just praise the author just over and over, and how this book ministered to them in such a deep place. And I said, "Did you leave the author a review?" And the lady said, "No, I don't think I've ever left a review." And I looked at all these women and I said, do you all leave reviews for your authors? And they all were like, "No." And then one lady looked at me and said, "Oh, you probably don't like that, do you?" And I'm thinking, no, I don't like this. But that's when I figured out, like, the people did not understand. They did not understand that yes, we love the words that you leave. But just 5 stars, maybe you feel inadequate to even write a sentence. If you just click the 5 stars, that is a big help, because we also have trollers who will come and shred a book in a matter of seconds. And we watched that happen to me this year. This man had written his own book on the biblical feast, and he was going to everyone else who had published a feast book and destroying it, leaving it 1 star, and then leaving them all to his book under a pen name. And that was removed. But if someone just leaves 1 star, my Polishing Jade novel has won several awards. I had someone leave 1 star because they didn't like that it was faith-based, and they felt like it should have been more clear that the book was faith-based. And so
it's a real thing, because especially since COVID, it seems like the crazy has come out of the woodwork. And especially since October 7th, the crazy has come out of the woodwork. And it doesn't matter what the content of the book is. They have bots. They're not even people, they're bots. And they will search places like Facebook and look for opportunities to do the thumbs down or the 1 star, or to just post hateful content. If there's a place like, say, Facebook, where you can post, to just automatically post hateful content if it's picking up words like Israel, and that sort of thing. And I've had them do that on my Facebook page. I had to go down and back and lock down some things, because if they just saw, say, an Israeli flag, the bot would hit it, and all of a sudden you've got this horrible stuff going on, and it's not even real people. They've just made it up. They've trained their little bot. I don't understand it, but they do it. And that's the thing to remember, is people who like your work are not necessarily that motivated to leave a review because we're inundated all day long with somebody wanting us to leave a review. Oh, you bought this coffee, leave a review. Or, if you walk past the new coffee shop, could you stop and leave a review? So people would know where anywhere you go. It's like you can't do anything anymore. Like leave a review. And I'm like, no, it's you're gonna pay me for my time if I stop and write this review. But if it's something I'm passionate about, if I care about it, if I benefited greatly from it in more than an average expected way, like if I bought coffee, I just want coffee. It's not going to be the greatest coffee in the universe, probably. But if it were, I'd leave a review. Okay. But if it's just coffee, it's just coffee. If this is just coffee, forget about it. But if you enjoyed it, if you feel like it really hit somewhere that was needed, that the author went above and beyond to try to open up the biblical world, or to try to pull in young people into an interest into the Bible, which you don't see a lot of people trying to do today. It's more like they go to university and the last thing they're worried about is the Bible. But the passionate, crazy people are out there and they're willing to write a review and hit 1 star. Those are the motivated, they are the most motivated right now. And that's what we're fighting as authors or even in ministry. They're the ones who are going to come find you and try to inundate with low reviews or hateful things. And unless there's enough people out there who really enjoy or have benefited from the book, that's going to be hard for people like us to counter. I mean, to silently love something, great, but if you're on board with us, consider, even the minimum, like I say on Amazon, you can just hit the star and the review can be, I think, as short as 5 words. I'm not.
Yes.
It's you can just, I like this book very much and I think it'll go through.
Yes.
But
And if you don't want to leave your name,
you don't
I
have to.
have people leave reviews and it just says Amazon customer, or one lady's name was me, which I was like, because first I looked at the review and I said, me wrote a review. But you can be disguised. We just need them. And also, one of the things I think is fun is when people enjoy the work and they decide to have a book club and get everybody on board. And then, and Hollisa and I speak for myself, I will jump in on a Zoom at the end of the book club. I would jump in and say hello and ask them, how they enjoyed the book, and sort of like we're doing right now, any questions you have for the author. And we're always trying to be creative because we work so hard. It's sort of like preparing a lovely meal for someone to sit down and enjoy. But then if you just get up and leave and you never thank that person, because yes, we enjoy writing. We love to write. Probably Hollisa and I could live in a cave and write, and every now and then pop out like Elijah and say hello, because give us a dog and a cabin or whatever, we would be happy forever. But we do need support. And I enjoy supporting other authors because if they support me, and sometimes even you can get a book and maybe you're reading it and you get to a chapter or something you don't disagree with. If you throw that book down, you might miss some wisdom in there. And we all have, different gifts that we are bringing to the body, all of us, you who are watching. We're always learning from one another. That's what makes the body of Messiah so beautiful, because it's, can the hand say to the foot, to the eye, all of these parts coming together. And so I feel like this book is going to do very well. And I am so excited to read the sequel and what other creative ideas that Adonai gives you, because I felt like I was in the desert. I felt like I was there. And, your character development was so well done. It was as if they were my friends, you know. Um,
Yeah.
and it was just so vivid, and I'm so proud of you.
Yeah,
Definitely.
thanks. That means a lot because, over the years, like you said, we've even done some writers' conferences together to try to learn from authors who have made it out there in the real world. And I remember, and I think you were there with me at this conference, and the guest speaker was describing her journey and how, before she was first published and had made a big name for herself, she would sit there and write for hours on a typewriter. Yes, IBM Selectric generation, that's us. And her mother would come in and she'd say, "Let's go shopping." And she says, "Oh, Mom, I can't. I'm working on this manuscript." And she says, "Oh, you're just doing that old typing again. Come on." And minimizing what was happening in that creative process that her mother couldn't understand. And it's really hard. Like if you're a musician, people don't really understand what you go through to write that music. If you're a fiction writer, people don't understand how much research, but how much of thought process
Mhm.
goes into not just writing, but rewriting and rewriting and looking at what others do and saying, how does this compare to that? And just the not fun stuff of grammar, and punctuation, not fun.
Yes.
But unless there's somebody that is kind of in that same boat with you that understands and they're willing to exchange ideas and critiques and editing and commas and all that, you're probably as an author surrounded by people who kind of have that same mindset as that lady's mom. Like, you're just doing that old typing on that computer. Come on, let's go do something meaningful, shopping.
That was my dad daily. You spend way too much time on that computer. You don't need to be on there.
Yeah.
And I'd say, Dad, but this is how these books I write that you enjoy, this is how they come forth. It's on this computer right here.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And it takes an incredible amount of uninterrupted time because, especially with a storyline, if you're working through a problem like, okay, how do I get this character from here to here? Because, I tend to start out sometimes with the end of something rather than the beginning. How do I get from here to here? And if you lose that thread of thought at my age, it may not swim back for a few days or weeks, If I lose that little creative fish and it swims off, I just have to pray that I've got enough bait that it'll come back for it eventually. If the pond is small, it'll be.
I think that's another thing. Writing is sort of our outlet. It gives us our freedom to just go wherever we want to go, because books, I know when you were learning to read, it was difficult, but once you learned to read, you could not stop reading books. So I think books are our friends, and Scorpion's Ascent is going to become your very dear friend.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
yep.
Definitely. So we're going to go ahead and close this out. I ask you one more question, and then you can let people know anything we haven't shared about Scorpion's Ascent and how they can get their copy again. But we were just wondering, what do you hope readers will take away from this book?
I hope they will not just fall in love with this little guy behind me, but I hope they'll follow him around the desert and feel like they're walking through the Bible.
Yeah.
Like they're just walking through the pages of the Bible in a very vivid, like they'll be able to smell it, touch it, see it, see the colors, hear the same things that I hear when I'm down there? Can you hear this bird? You know, can you see maybe this snake moving under the sand? Can you see how these huge hares, Hares, you know, can you see them with their big ears? You know, can you hear the sound of wolves or a shofar through the wadi? I want you to love it so much, you're going to go read your Bible
Yes.
and say, wow, you know what? It really can come alive.
Yes. Amen. I love that.
Amen. Well,
And
you can.
we're going to be developing, especially for homeschool moms, but any kind of school, um, I'm going to be making up a free downloadable educator's guide so that you'll have some activities if you do have kids, say 12 and up. It'll give you some good ideas, free ideas, and maybe, you know, if you do have a book club, especially a Christian book club, um, I think it'll be helpful to have that resource. I haven't quite started on it yet, but I will soon, very, very soon. Hopefully, I want to get it ready before July the 1st.
Awesome.
Well, what an honor and privilege it's been to have you on today, Hollisa, and what a breath of fresh air. And we'll definitely be praying that this goes forth and ministers to many people.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for inviting me.
Would you let the viewers know where they can see the website and check out a link there to read up on the book?
Sure. If they'll go to www.scorpionsascent.com, not only will there be tons of information about the book itself, there's also maps. Because if you're going to follow this kid around the desert, he's like a little Indiana Jones. You need his you need to know where he's going. So you can print off those maps and that'll help you keep up. And so sign up for just a little newsletter. I just plan to, you know, keep up with the archaeology, plant life, animal life, anything I see as I research that I thought, you know, a reader that's interested in this book might also like some little tidbit of archaeology or something about the bird migrations. It's not going to be something in your inbox that's going to overwhelm you and, you know, that sort of thing. But they can sign up for that quarterly. I think it's a quarterly newsletter we're planning. And if there is a sequel, which the sequel to this one is called The Snake Path, it'll take you a year forward. And if you're interested in knowing, getting an update, like, oh, there's a new one coming out, then just getting on that mailing list. And I promise we will not pester you.
Yes, same here. Please like and subscribe. And I will put the links up where you can find Dr. Alewine and her new fiction. And so anyway, it's been a blessing, and we can't wait to hear more about the sequel and other things that you're writing. So blessings.
Love you guys. Thank you.
Love you.
Love you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.